Good afternoon. World War II veterans, those that served on the home front, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lou Jaffe, and on behalf of the entire board of the Oregon World War II Memorial Foundation, I am very pleased and honored to welcome you today to this dedication ceremony. I would like to acknowledge the members of the Grand Ronde tribe for their spiritual blessing ceremony. It was beautiful and very touching and a great way to initiate our memorial. We are here today to honor our World War II veterans and indeed their entire generation for their courage, their service to country, their sacrifices, and the legacy they have bestowed upon us. In the words of former Senator Bob Dole, who sends his regards to us today, this generation exemplified courage beyond measure, loyalty beyond words, sacrifice and ingenuity beyond imagining. Today we wish to acknowledge this legacy and to say thank you. We have many honored and distinguished guests with us today, but I am particularly honored to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Bob Maxwell from Bend, Oregon. Bob is a World War II veteran and the oldest living recipient of the Medal of Honor. Bob Maxwell.
Our first speaker this afternoon is a longtime leader in our state government. He has served his country well. He has served this state well. He is currently serving as our governor. Please welcome Governor John Kitzhaber.
Thank you very much. It is an honor to say a few words here today. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge former Governor Ted Kulingoski, who I think it's fair to say set the gold standard for how we would treat our veterans here in the state. I'm also delighted to be here with my longtime friend Frank Moore, who was actually on the beaches of Normandy 70 years ago today. D-Day was 74 years ago on July 6, 1944. On that history-defining morning, Allied troops led by the United States crossed the English Channel and, as you know, landed on the beaches of Normandy under the name Operation Overlord. That invasion involved 150,000 Allied troops, 5,000 ships, 11,000 aircraft. At the end of the first day, 9,000 Allied soldiers were dead or wounded. My own father set sail from New York Harbor on April 4th, 1944, the day his first daughter was born, who he didn't see for over 2 years. And he entered Europe through those same beaches several months after D-Day and marched all the way to Berlin. And before he died, actually 8 years ago, last Wednesday, I would call him up every year on June 6th and thank him for saving the world. 70 years later and half a world away, we are gathered here on this delightful spring afternoon to remember those who served and sacrificed and survived and came home to their families and their communities to rebuild this nation and to rebuild our world. When we talk about heroes, I think we tend to think of people with superhuman powers. I don't think that's what heroes are. I think Governor Tom McCall got it right when he said heroes are not giants framed against a red sky. They are ordinary people who say, this is my community, and it's our responsibility to make it better. Veterans memorials are often and rightly somber affairs, sobering affairs. But in our sober reflection and in our honoring, let's not forget to be grateful for what we have been given by what others gave. We remember those who gave their lives at Normandy and on battlefields across the face of the earth, on our nation's histories of war. But it is also important for us to recognize those who survived not only World War II, but Korea and Vietnam and Iraq another time, and Afghanistan. Many of those people have joined us here today. I want to simply add that veterans are not a burden that we have to bear. They are an enormous asset that we have the opportunity to be in touch with. And veterans are exactly what Oregon needs. They are mission-driven, hardworking, service-minded men and women who are ready and able to help their community. And all they ask for in return is peace of mind and health and an opportunity to prosper. I also want to add that soon another set of soldiers from the Oregon National Guard will be deployed to Afghanistan, and I ask all Oregonians to hold those guardsmen and women in their hearts and in their prayers during that deployment. And I also urge every Oregonian to take the time to learn what they can do to help our returning veterans, regardless of which war they fought in. Those who have returned from combat and those whose physical and mental injuries remain 20, 50, 70 years after they were received. Robert Kennedy once said that few men are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows or the censure of their colleagues or the wrath of their society. That moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence, yet it is the one essential vital quality for those who seek to change a world that yields most difficultly to changing. I think all of those things are what we're here to celebrate today and to honor. Certainly bravery. There was more bravery involved 70 years ago than we can ever possibly imagine. And certainly great intelligence for those who saved humanity from one of the worst and darkest evils that we have ever faced. But also moral courage, also sacrifice and service, for which I, and I'm sure everyone here, will be eternally grateful. So let me thank each and every one of you, certainly the veterans from World War II, but all the other veterans who are here today. Thank you for saving the world.
I would like to introduce to you Mr. Bill Markham from Roseburg, a World War II veteran with the 8th U.S. Army Air Force and a former legislator of long standing in the Oregon House. Mr. Bill Markham.
I got a lot of paper here, but you're not going to hear much. It's a pleasure to be here, believe me, and I'm just tickled pink that I lived long enough to see it, and I'm delighted to see a lot of it still standing. Today we are honoring the greatest generation of men and women who wore the uniform in War II from Oregon. First, we should acknowledge those that made us happen. The Oregon legislature in 2011 passed legislation honoring the 153,000 Oregonians who served during World War II. The Oregon World War II Memorial Foundation and its board and its committees, and I mean they're hardworking committees, and all the great people who helped them raise the money. It was $1.25 million. They did the heavy lifting. They did the grunt work, if you will. Two individuals that really stand out in my thinking that made this happen, I'm going to introduce both of them. Lou Jaffe, who's the founder and president of the organization. He was a U.S. Army veteran from Vietnam. And Jim Willis, the former director of the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs, U.S. Air Force, Vietnam. Would you two please stand? Thank you. This, our World War II memorial dedicated to the memory of Oregonians who wore the uniform in War II, and in particular the 3,771 Oregonians who paid the full price. They did not come home. And their names are engraved in marble on this great memorial, mindful that they paid the supreme price for our liberty. In closing, the letter that I'm going to read to you has to do with D-Day, Europe, 70 years back. However, I am mindful of the war was going on in the Pacific at the same time, and we certainly needed both victories, or your grandkids would be learning English as a second language. Now, I did not fly on D-Day. However, I'll say this. My dad was a reserve officer, and he was a colonel, and he was had a battalion landed that day. In a moment, I'm going to read you a letter that says it all. The Supreme Allied Commander of Europe in World War II was, of course, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, and he had stirring words for the men and women of his Normandy invasion. After he gave the order, "We go," that was probably 2 days ahead of D-Day. Where am I here? All participants in the June 6, 1944 offensive received a copy of his call for nothing less than full victory. All 163,000, theoretically anyway, received this letter. And the letter, it says, "Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of Allied Expeditionary Force, you're about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we strive these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you. The hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere march with you. In company with our brave allies and brothers in arms on other fronts, you will bring about the destruction of the German war machine, elimination of the Nazi tyranny of the oppressed people of Europe, and security for ourselves in a free world. Your task will not be an easy one. Your enemy is well-trained, well-equipped, and battle-hardened. He will fight savagely, but this is the year 1944. Much happened since the Nazi triumphs of the 40 and 41 years. The United Nations have inflicted upon the Germans great defeats. In open battle, man-to-man, our air offensive has seriously reduced their strength in the air and their capacity to wage war on the ground, and our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and munitions of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. Free men of the world are marching toward victory. I have full confidence in your courage, your devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory. Good luck, and let us beseech the blessing of the Almighty God upon this great and noble undertaking. Thank you. And if anybody wants a copy, I have of Eisenhower's speech.
Good job. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to now introduce you to Mr. Dirk Kruisman, also of Roseburg, who was a young boy in Nazi-occupied Holland and would like to share some brief remembrances today with us.
Good afternoon. Today is another anniversary of D-Day, the 6th of June, 1944. In many places in this country, it will pass with little notice nor celebration, unlike here. It is, however, a day that I will always remember. It is the day that was the beginning of the end of a long, brutal war in Europe. I was a 10-year-old boy living in German-occupied Holland. For us, the war was 4 years long. 4 years of countless air raids and bombings and strafings. Hundreds of hours huddling in a cellar, scared to death. Hearing the airplanes overhead, the anti-aircraft guns shooting, and the bombs dropping. The years when we'd seen the Jews rounded up in Amsterdam and deported to places unknown to us at that time. Years of ever-decreasing food rations, no private cars, no private radios, and a newspaper reporting only those things the Germans wanted us to know. There were rumors that evening in early June that Europe had been invaded by the United States and British armed forces. But news does not travel easily when to listen to the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, was a cause for arrest, and the evening curfew was enforced at gunpoint. I do remember my mother telling us that if the rumor of the invasion was true, then now there was hope that the war would end someday. Several days later, the bombers came over again, but this time they dropped small booklets with stories and photos of the invasion, and we knew it was real. We would have 11 more months of occupation, months without electricity or central heating in one of the coldest winters of that century. Months where food was so scarce we ate dogs and cats and tulip bulbs and grass, and for a while sugar beets for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Yet we were the lucky ones. Our next door neighbor and his son were executed by the Germans because they were members of the Dutch resistance. More than 1 million people died in those months in the German concentration camps. There are millions of people in France, Belgium, and Holland who were given a chance to live again because of the blood, sweat, and tears of the soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the United States and Great Britain and Canada. I find it so sad that so many people, both here in the United States as well as in Europe, have forgotten or never even learned what the people of the United States of America did in those years. I will be forever grateful to the World War II veterans who gave me and so many others the chance to live in this great country and enjoy the multitude of blessings which one can here obtain. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Ted Lister from Bend. Ted has been one of our most ardent supporters in every sense of the word for this project. He's become a good friend, is a true cowboy poet, and a proud member of the Bend Band of Brothers.
Thank you, Lou. Protocol says that I should start by recognizing all of the dignitaries, beginning with our Governor, John Kitzhaber, and so many distinguished ones. But if I did that, I wouldn't have time to do my poem. So I will, however, say that I will pause and recognize my friend Bob Maxwell behind me and all of you World War II veterans who are here sitting in front of me, and I salute you. Thank you. I wrote this poem and I dedicate it to my father, whose name is on the black wall, Lieutenant Theodore Charles Lister, USN. He was lost on the USS Juno along with 684 other souls, including the Sullivan brothers, on the night of Friday the 13th November off of Savo Island in Guadalcanal. The monument. It stands in stony silence in testament to those who served this state in World War II to save us from our foes. The citizens of Oregon, forever in their debt, have built this solemn monument that we shall not forget the sacrifice of those who served, wherever it may be, in factory or the battlefield, in land, in air or sea. Some gave their time, it's all they had. Some gave with blood and pain, and many gave the ultimate, that freedom would remain. This monument should be a place where all can come and rest. And while they're here, reflect upon what makes this state the best. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to introduce to you our guest speaker, Major General Daniel Hokanson, Oregon's Adjutant General. General Hokanson is a graduate of West Point and has served on active duty in air cavalry, attack helicopter, and aircraft test organizations prior to joining the Oregon National Guard. He has commanded at the company, battalion, and brigade combat team levels over the course of multiple combat deployments. Please join me in welcoming General Hokanson.
Good afternoon, Governor Kitzhaber, Governor Kulingoski, Mr. Maxwell, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and most of all, our World War II veterans whose service and sacrifices we honor today. It's a distinct honor for me to be here among our nation's heroes I read so much about growing up. And on such an important day in our nation's history, the 70th anniversary of D-Day, what many consider the greatest military event ever conducted, the Allied invasion at Normandy. In respect of our World War II veterans, I will not attempt to encapsulate even a small part of what they, their families, or our nation did, not only for America, but for the world. In the time we have today, my words could never give it the justice it is due. Instead, I would like to share a few brief stories that may be very similar to your own experiences, or versions with different names and events you may have heard or read about over time. What is similar in all of these is the enduring memory of a generation who gave so much to give us the life we have today. My stories began as an elementary school student. In our small library, my favorite books were a collection of books on World War II battle and events. Each was about 3/4 to an inch thick. They included Pearl Harbor, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, Iwo Jima, Guadalcanal, the Battle of the Bulge, the Battle of Britain, and the day whose anniversary we share today, D-Day. Reading those books captivated my imagination, and I thought they gave me a glimpse into what it must have been like to be there. It also gave me a deep admiration and respect for our real-life heroes who experienced those events and the inspiration that maybe one day I could be like one of them. As I grew older and experienced war myself, I realized nothing could ever help me fully understand what it must have been like to be there. Only those who experienced it firsthand would ever know what it was like to experience the sights, sounds, and smells of wars on foreign lands. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and merchant Marines arrived on these foreign lands, on the open seas, and in the skies above them. But many found these wonderful sights blemished by destruction and tragedy, the sounds of foreign languages interrupted by the machines of war, and the unfamiliar smells mixed with the smell of smoke, fuel, and sweat. In the end, however, with their victories, the familiar sights, sounds, and smells eventually returned, and with them came hope. We will never fully understand what our World War II veterans experienced, what their senses remember, or how they felt. And in retrospect, maybe that's one of the most unselfish and profound acts of their service. They experienced it themselves until victory was complete, so no one else would have to. In the same elementary school where I read about World War II, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Ray Knudsen worked. Like many others of his generation, he worked hard, raised a good family, and was a good citizen. I never saw him complain, and as the janitor of our school, I'm sure he had many reasons to at times. What I never knew about Mr. Knudsen until a year later was that as a young man, his military service included a beautiful Sunday morning in Hawaii in December of 1941, when our world changed forever. That day changed the course of his life and our nation's. There was also a man I never met that I wish I had. He also served his country in World War II, and the only link I had to his military service was a Purple Heart in an old suitcase. After some research over the years, I found his service number, date of birth, place of birth, and with assistance from his next of kin, I received a large envelope in the mail from the Department of Veterans Affairs containing over 150 pages encapsulating Lester Triplett's life of over 24 years in the Navy, to include almost 4 years of service in World War II. In those pages, I read about his service at the invasion of Sicily, the bombardment of Tarawa and Wake Island, operations at Bougainville and the Western Caroline Islands and Leyte Gulf, bombardment support to Okinawa, northern Luzon, and Formosa operations, the assault on Iwo Jima, and one of our nation's greatest air battles of the war near the Marianas Islands. In those papers, I also found the documentation to support the Purple Heart in the suitcase. It was awarded for wounds received trying to save the last U.S. aircraft carrier lost in the war, the USS Princeton, where he and over half of the USS Birmingham's crew received Purple Hearts when they pulled alongside the stricken ship trying to save it before its magazines exploded. There were over 153,000 Oregonians like Ray Knudsen and Lester Triplett who served our nation in World War II, each with their own story and each with their own legacy. Our nation was fortunate to be their home, and we will forever owe a debt of gratitude to the 3,772 Oregonians who made the ultimate sacrifice and whose loss is felt even today by their families, their friends, and their communities. Mr. Knudsen passed away in 1993 before I went back to my hometown to thank him myself. And Mr. Triplett passed away before I could ask his permission to marry his daughter. Today, however, we have the opportunity to say to all World War II veterans, present and those no longer with us, thank you. Thank you not just for what you did for all of us, our country, and our world, but thank you for the example you set then, the example you set here today, and for every day in between. Thank you for living the lives of the 3,772 Oregonians whose names are engraved on this memorial never had the chance to live, and for leaving us and this world a better place. You are and will forever be our greatest generation. Thank you.
This memorial is not about glorifying war, nor is it about glorifying military might. Rather, it is symbolic of the human spirit and of a time in our nation's history when we were of one singular purpose. It is our hope that this memorial will serve as an everlasting reminder of what can be accomplished when our nation is unified and when everyone shares in the sacrifice. Our spiritual leaders tell us we have three obligations in this life: to love, to serve, and to remember. To our World War II veterans and their generation, you have taught us how to love our country, you have taught us how to serve our country, and now it is our turn to fulfill our obligation to remember. I now ask Governor Kitzhaber to join me. Governor, I'm privileged to present to you and ask that you accept on behalf of the people of Oregon this memorial to our World War II generation.
We will display this in the governor's office so all the people of Oregon can honor it and come and respect it and remember.
Two things about this memorial today I hope you notice, this dedication. And that is the presence of the young Marines and the presence of the North Salem High School Army Junior ROTC. That was done on purpose. because this memorial is intended to be a teaching memorial. There are located on that memorial some things that are called QR codes, which means quick response, which means that your iPhone and your iPad can read those codes and then tell you what the story is behind that. The reason that I know this is true is because I talked to someone that's in high school. And so we're about to see some of those young high school people at their very, very best. And so I now ask you to rise as the Junior ROTC Army Honor Guard from North Salem High School retires the colors.